Show podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials on nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you and myself is your nerdy Judy George, and with me here today, the mistress of yarn, my mom.
Hey.
So, we have a new topic here this week, because you requested it last week, and I think it's only fair that this will probably take us 3 weeks to do, in all honesty.
I'm excited.
So, we're going to be talking about The Mandalorian, and the obvious homework for this is going to be Season 1 and Season 2. Now, you can only watch this on Disney Plus, so if you don't have a subscription to Disney Plus, they offer, like, trial versions of it, so you could use that if you wanted to. But almost all the new Disney stuff that's going to be coming out, when it's not coming out in theaters or it's not coming out on the Disney network or the Disney TV channel on cable, most likely is going to come out on Disney Plus. So again, like that's going to include WandaVision and a lot of the new Marvel stuff that's coming out here as well. Because there's also TV shows related to Miss Marvel, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and a number of other Marvel property stuff.
How much is Disney Plus?
I believe it's
I pulled out the phone.
I believe it's $14.99 a month.
Okay, so it's because I have to say we now have cable for the first time, like since you were 10, and
we had it before I was 10. I didn't even notice.
Well, it may even have been before that. We turned off cable when MTV became a big thing because we didn't want you guys watching MTV when we weren't home.
I admittedly didn't even know we had cable at any particular point. I would have never.
Did. So you grew up in a house, well, and it may have been even earlier than that, but you basically grew up in a house without cable.
Oh, my apologies. It is $12.99 a month.
Okay.
To get both Hulu, Disney, and ESPN Plus. If you're just looking for Disney Plus, that's just $6.99 a month.
Too cool. Okay, I can swing.
Yeah.
Because where I was going with this is we now have cable and we're still having a hard time finding things to watch. We were on Netflix last night, which Netflix actually offers a lot. We just have to remember that we have access to that because we're old. And we were watching The Crown.
How are you enjoying The Crown?
It's interesting. It'd be even more interesting if you understood how much was fact and how much was fiction.
Okay.
Because they're having to create conversations that would have taken place in a private room and nobody would have seen. Mm-hmm. But
it is relatively historically accurate.
It is in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Like very much a period piece costume.
Worth it for the wardrobe, just to watch Princess Margaret.
Oh yeah.
Worth it for wardrobe alone. And we're in the early. We're in like the still finishing out the 1950s.
Yeah, so you're still just like in season 1 right now.
Yeah, but enjoying it quite a bit.
Good, yeah. Okay, so again, Mandalorian 2 seasons. So we'll spend this next week here. We'll come back and we'll do season 1, and then after that we'll do season 2.
I am looking forward to this because do you know how many times I've been asked to crochet a mini baby Yoda?
Yes.
The little figures.
That'll come into play here. But
Will it?
Yes, but we won't talk about Baby Yoda until next week because
okay.
Because there's a lot more going on there, and I want to kind of preface this a little bit by trying to actually speak about the Mandalorian themselves. Actually, so the Mandalorian is actually not necessarily the name of the character, although he's called Mando. I've seen various crochetings of it.
I've also been asked to crochet Bernie.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like, God, that's a great picture of Bernie.
Yeah.
So the Mandalorians are a race, or are not necessarily a race, but a collection of individuals that come from the planet of Mandalore and are warriors in the best sense possible.
Now, do we meet one in Star Wars, like movie 5? Isn't he one of the bounty hunters for Luke? Or not for Luke, for
yeah,
Han?
so that was kind of the interesting take here today, because rather than starting from the past and working our way up to the current, we actually have to start from the current and work backwards.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm
I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to ruin it for you.
Oh no! You've got the right idea here, though. So yes, so we do see a Mandalorian in the sense of Boba Fett.
Okay.
So Boba Fett is this weird and interesting character in Star Wars lore because in the first movie he shows like in all of
Define first movie. Are we talking movie 4?
Oh, okay, so he technically shows up in movie 4 if you watch the special edition, but he really doesn't he doesn't actually come into play or actually is visible until episode 5, which is Empire Strikes Back. And what's interesting about this character is that he's not even on screen for 5 whole minutes. And he only says 4 lines in the entire series. And yet if you were to get onto a top 10 list, he's usually like at least number 10, 9, 8, and sometimes higher.
Okay, so what's interesting, and I'll tell you why I think that is because there's a lot you can do with the idea of a bounty hunter.
Oh yeah.
In space.
Well, not only is it's a bounty hunter in space, he's got this cool kind of masked look where he's
got a cool spaceship. That spaceship's kind of cool because you do see that.
The spaceship is kind of cool as well. And again, what's interesting about this character, and I think what happens with a lot of silent protagonists, especially, is that it's a vehicle to allow people to put upon their own thoughts and feelings onto a character that may not actually be what the character is actually doing or thinking in a lot of cases.
This is where fan pages, because I've gone on to fan pages on a couple of our other topics, where fanfic.
Fanfics, yes.
Okay, so I've gone into fanfics for a couple of topics and then have found them on Jane Austen threads. Mm-hmm. So there are fanfics on Jane Austen for Jane Austen tales that take things all sorts of places too.
Oh no, yeah. Fanfics go all fanfics.
So they're cross genre.
Oh yeah.
And it'd almost be worth having a topic just on fanfic, because there are all sorts of stories developed out of other people's interpretations. And what I liken it to is what we did last week or the week before with Wonder Woman, where we kind of suggested other storylines for the movie that we saw, where we took it other places.
Yeah, or and that happens.
We envisioned,
yeah, and that happens quite a bit. In all honesty, I mean, there's a lot of people. A very good example of this is actually in comic books, where a lot of the people that are now writing in comic books were fans of the material well beforehand. Again, and I think one of the more famous versions of that was the guy who is one of the current people in charge of Sonic the Hedgehog. So because again, one of these guys created a comic created an online comic for Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sega liked his artwork so much that they gave him free reign to make an official Sega comic on Sonic the Hedgehog that would eventually replace the Archie comics. And he's the guy that said, he's now the guy at the end of the day that says this is who Sonic the Hedgehog is, or these are the characteristics of Sonic the Hedgehog. Even so much that when the first set of trailers came out for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, they ended up having to redo a lot of the material, and they brought him in to help with that because they wanted to because again, everyone kind of collectively saw Sonic. It was just no. It
is a little different version of Sonic.
Oh yeah. Again, I mean, but I think if you were to put this Sonic the Hedgehog against what was the '90s version of Sonic the Hedgehog, they'd be pretty consistent.
Well, and the nice thing about having a fan who loves the character rather than having a really good artist that does other storylines is that he's true to the character's past, to the development of the character, rather than taking it completely other places.
Another good example of this is the World of Warcraft movie. So Duncan Jones, which is this really kind of cool director, because he's done a lot of these movies that give you kind of... you ever watch Moon?
No, but...
So Moon's this movie of this guy who works on the moon. He's really anxious to go back, and he's been on the moon now for the last 18 months, and his period of, because you're only on the moon for up to like 18 months at a time, and then you get sent back down to Earth.
Okay.
Because they mine the moon for minerals.
Uh-huh.
The notion being is that like he's gonna go see his, he's gonna go back home and see his daughter again finally, and then come to find out that like he's actually, that there's a clone of him that's ready to pop open to take over for him, and he doesn't realize that he's actually a clone as well, and that this has been an ongoing cycle.
Ooh, interesting storyline.
Yeah, and again, it's a really cool one. Well, he did another one where.
So he's a clone, and he has real emotions and a real life,
Mm-hmm.
but there's somebody else taking his place while he's gone who might have taken it in other directions. I mean, how does he catch up?
Well, again, no, it's a clone of himself that pops in.
Right.
Pops in. This clones only last for 18 months, only last for 24 months, and they just replace it whenever the clones are about to die.
Oh my gosh!
I know, right?
Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to see if I can find out.
It's very interesting. He did another one with Jake Gyllenhaal, if I remember correctly, where Jake Gyllenhaal keeps going back in time to a subway car to stop a terrorist attack on the car that kills a bunch of people. And so every time Jake Gyllenhaal goes back in time, he learns something new.
A little like Groundhog's Day?
A little kind of like Groundhog's Day, but I mean like...
we should be playing all over the place this weekend, by the way.
We really should. Yeah, that's such a great movie too. But he gets further along, but sometimes when he does something in there, it changes other stuff going forward as well.
Butterfly effect?
Yes. So yeah, Duncan Jones made these really interesting movies at the end of the day, and when they were looking for a director for World of Warcraft, he was very emphatic on wanting to get that role because he plays World of Warcraft. And if you watch the movie and you're a fan of World of Warcraft, you see them going over Stormwind, and you're just like, oh, it's the city I've always wanted. It's so perfect, and because it's all laid out properly and everything is in the right places. Things look like they do in the game. Orcs are these massive, like 8-foot tall creatures, where the humans are still like these 5'8", 6-foot tall creatures.
And do tell me the orcs have tusks.
The orcs have like tusks that coming out of their mouth. They're huge and they're gnarly. Like
every time I look at a warthog in the wild, because it just recently came back from Uganda, I think of orcs.
Oh yeah,
because they've got the tusk thing going.
Absolutely, and again, like if you watch the movie, it doesn't exactly follow the original Warcraft 1 game necessarily, but it plays all the right beats. It gets you to where you need to be, and it actually does a really good job of telling this really great story. And again, if you're a big fan of World of Warcraft, myself included, like it's a spot-on movie. It really is pretty spot on.
And that's what having somebody who really is in love with the topic is really.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, the Warcraft movie didn't do very well. Again, a high fantasy thing is a very kind of hard sell to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the story moves around very quickly from character to character. So if you're not familiar with who the characters are, like it's easy to get lost in that particular movie. But I hope that if they ever decide to make another one, that like they keep Duncan Jones, because again, he's clearly a guy that understood it and spent a lot of time working on it. Because again, I mean, like I watched that movie and I was like, that's Azeroth right there. I know World of War. That's this lower Eastern Kingdoms, because they've got it like spot on.
Very cool.
So
Mandalorian, do they take it someplace where fanfic took it, or is it?
So actually, what's very interesting about the Mandalorian here, to go back to Boba Fett, is that again, Mandalorian was not even a term that came up until the comic books.
I was going to say, they don't call him that.
No, I mean, again, keep in mind, they don't even call him Boba Fett until Return of the Jedi, when
movie 7, if you're keeping track.
6. So Return of the Jedi, like at this point here, they finally call him by name, Boba Fett. Now he's listed as Boba Fett in the Empire Strikes Back movie in the credits, but you wouldn't know who that was unless you knew what the character's name was. And so a lot of his own story and background really got fleshed out in comics and additional material for Star Wars. And this is also where, when they started describing him here, they started describing his armor as Mandalorian armor.
Ah.
And so that's kind of where the term that Mandalorian comes from initially, is mostly based off the armor that Boba Fett wears. And again, it's interesting for Boba Fett because again, in Empire Strikes Back, he's there for like less than 10 scenes, or not even 5 full minutes.
Yeah.
He only speaks 4 lines, which is "As you wish," "He's no good to me dead," "What if he doesn't survive? He's worth it. He's worth more to me."
And they're on Lando Calrissian.
Yeah, this is all in Cloud City.
Yeah.
Which is some sort of like mining town, which I don't understand.
Because you don't see any mines.
Yeah, and like, I guess.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Deep Space Nine in Star Trek is a mining big mining
Yep.
space station. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why you would do the mining and processing on planet. You take it up to space to do that. It seems like a lot of work. Or I don't know. Maybe
But the land's cheap.
I would hope so. So originally, when you look back at who Boba Fett was actually originally supposed to be a commando trooper in the similar vein of the stormtroopers. And so he was supposed to have he was supposed to be what it was dubbed a super trooper, which is a funny term because, again, I think of Super Trooper and I think of
the movie.
I think of this cult movie that I watched in college like about 1 billion times with friends.
I remember taking you and your friends to it for a birthday party.
Probably my little brother then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so one of my littler brothers then, because I remember
Okay.
because I remember
Must have been Mark.
Probably. So yeah, eventually what they ended up doing is they ended up rechanging the idea from this commando down to a bounty hunter, and then this is what eventually became Boba Fett, and kind of also started spawning all this lore about Mandalore and the Mandalorians here. Canonically, though, when we move on forward from that, we get to Jango Fett, who despite being like a very kind of not very much a major character in in episode 2, which is Clone Wars, he's actually like the most important character in a lot of Star Wars lore.
Really?
If you think about it in a certain way. So,
Okay.
If you think about it here, keep in mind that so Jango Fett was a full Mandalorian, and he was the basis for the clones in the Clone Wars.
Got it.
And so he's so basically it's him as the eponymous sort of characters.
The master warrior.
He's all these different clones at the end of the day, which sparked this entire war that's named basically after his clones.
Clone Wars,
So again, he is. If you think about it from a certain perspective here, like he is because again they thought of him as this perfect template, and even a lot of the armor for the clone troopers is somewhat modeled off of Mandalorian armor at the end of the day. 'Cause it's got that similar T kind of
it does,
shape for the clone troopers on there, and armor in a very similar sense.
Yeah.
So again, I find that very interesting for him. Now, keep in mind that Jango Fett is Boba Fett's father, but Boba Fett himself is actually a clone of Jango Fett. The only major difference being is that the clone troopers have a gene inside them that artificially ages them quicker, so they become full adults within about 2 years.
So they don't have any childhood? They have no fun?
Well, no. I mean, they're bred to be soldiers because you need a disposable army that you can slice up if you ever need to.
Well, yeah, but
Again, keep in mind that was one of the reasons.
I love my inner child.
I appreciate my inner child too, but I mean, like the childhood they did not have. Now Boba Fett himself though is an unmodified clone, so he doesn't have the same aging process that the original clone troopers had.
Okay, so they age sooner, but does that mean they enter
Yes.
seniorhood sooner?
From the way it's been described to me and the way that it's presented in the series, is that they go from childhood to adolescence to adulthood within the span of about 2 years. So by the time they're out there, like they're like in their early 20s when they get started.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point onward, they age faster, but not quite as fast. So by the time of
by the time they're 50, they're old.
Well, in most cases here, by the time they're 30, they're old.
Okay.
Because a lot of what happens or even sooner actually, because if you assume the Clone Wars took place over the course of about 7-8 years, give or take, when we get to another TV show called Rebels, you see a lot of the old clone soldiers that are all very much in like their 60s and 70s. So the aging process, I would think for a lot of cases, doesn't truly slow down so much, but it's still very much, it's still very much a heightened sort of quickening sort of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, like in a lot of cases, because they shut down the cloning process after the rise of the Empire, they don't necessarily do a whole lot of more clones. So a lot of the remaining clones die off after,
and then they're gone forever.
Yeah, so by the time we get to like Luke Skywalker, most clones have died off by this point because of old age.
Okay, so it opens up an interesting question. How come you never cloned Darth Vader?
They were always okay. So there's a mixed topic on this actually. So the Force in and of itself is not something you can necessarily clone easily, at least. But
Anakin, so Anakin Skywalker has no lineage with Jedi, and he's described as being almost like an immaculate conception.
Pretty much, yeah. So, and again, I mean, it's
which I always find biblically interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why they went that route, but again, if you look at if you ever decide to look at Superman, he is the he leaves his parents at a dying planet and gets raised by Kansas people, but he's got a very biblical sort of Joseph sort of tone to him.
Yeah.
Which is again another very biblical reference for Superman as well.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, like the Bible loves to crop itself up ever so often.
Well, it doesn't have a choice in it. It's just sort of what happens. It's all over. If you ever read Lewis Carroll and the Chronicles of Narnia, the line is very definitely Christ, and so
very ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Which is a good word enough itself. We don't get to use very often.
This is true. So you can't clone Jedi spirit.
No, but there's a game series called The Force Unleashed, which tells the story of Darth Vader's apprentice.
Darth Vader had an apprentice.
Darth Vader had an apprentice called Starkiller. It's his actual family crest that is the basis for the Rebel crest at the end of the day. So it's kind of the swooping sort of like bird sort of thing.
Yeah.
In the first game, the character of Starkiller, which was originally what was Luke Skywalker's last name originally.
Starkiller.
So it was
Skywalker is a much better name.
Skywalker is a much better name, but his original version of his name, as penned by George Lucas here, would have been Luke Starkiller.
Interesting.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
So the character of Starkiller dies, or is presumed dead by the end of the series, and then when he comes back in the second game, you come to learn that he's actually a clone. That this Starkiller is not the same Starkiller that was there originally. That one has actually died, but this one is a genetic clone that's been implanted with all of those old memories.
But is he a Jedi?
He is Force sensitive and has the abilities of a Force user, in the sense that he has all the abilities of a Jedi, but he also shoots out Sith lightning, which is not a common trait amongst the Jedi.
Okay, so he's the best of.
He's kind of like the best of, and so when you play the second game here, like you can clone, you can apparently clone Force sensitive people, but it's not an easy process. It's kind of like a 1 in a million sort of gambles when you do that. Because Darth Vader
Is it a taboo topic? I mean, because
Not-
you would think you wouldn't want a bunch of Force-sensitive people out there.
Well, that was one of the things. So, like, the Caminos did not make their cloning technology well known to anybody, and in fact, the fact that it was so lost to even the Jedi, like the Jedi didn't even know that these facilities existed at all. It was actually wiped from the record. So a lot of people didn't even know these places existed or that this technology existed at all. And then certainly by the time you get to the Rise of the Empire here, they stop all cloning processes and actually ban cloning as an activity here. That's only available to the Republic, and even then, or excuse me, to the Empire at this point. And even then, it's like rarely do we ever do this. We don't really actually ever do this because you're not allowed to do it.
Well, because somebody could use it for forces of evil.
Precisely, yeah.
And you make your own army to take over. And so I get that. But what's interesting to me about this conversation is Luke believes he's the last Jedi.
Yeah. But I mean, as Star Wars mythos likes to contradict itself here, that Luke may think he's the last Jedi. There's actually a fair amount of Jedi and Force-sensitive people that are out there.
They haven't developed the skill yet.
Either they haven't developed the skill, or actually what they are is they're Jedi that are in hiding. So you've got Yoda, Obi-Wan Kenobi, we're all hiding.
But by the time you get to the Last Jedi, they're all dead.
They are. There's other people that do pop up occasionally.
Well, you have Rey.
Rey, no, again, fully trained Jedi.
Oh, okay.
And I actually have one of them in here as well. But no, yeah, again, the cloning thing you would think would come up more frequently, but again, the Empire really didn't want anybody else raising an army against him at all.
Okay.
So you get rid of cloning.
Okay.
It's much the same way if we go back to Fullmetal Alchemist. One of the rules is that you don't do human transmutation at all. The real reason that they told you not to do the real reason that they wanted you not to do human transmutation was because so you didn't raise an army against the government.
Right, but somebody does.
Oh, they do. They make their own clones.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoilers. Or unless you watched the movie.
Yeah.
So Jango Fett himself is again, which is interesting because again, I think there's more scenes of Boba Fett in because Boba Fett in Clone Wars is actually a child. He's probably like 9-10 years old, maybe.
Uh-huh.
And I think he's actually got more scenes than he does when he's in the original trilogy. Or more screen time, at least. Because he only actually appears in the second movie.
I will say this, though. You know, the minute you say Boba Fett, you know who he is. Because and you never actually see his face.
No, you never see his face.
You see his head.
Mm-hmm.
But you know who he is because whoever created that particular armor was brilliant. It's very
distinctive and very much
visually vivid.
Mm-hmm. Like you see it, and you're just like,
as well as the spaceship. It was always one of my favorite spaceships because it's.
I theorize when it comes to the Boba Fett look is that it's this military sort of green with like these accents of red and yellow on it that feels vaguely
50s.
No. I think what it really feels like, it feels foreign, and it feels like hostily foreign. Kind of like a Che Guevara kind of thing going on there, or kind of like a South American sort of dictator or African sort of like warlord sort of thing. Like it's the red, green, and yellow are an interesting pair because green and yellow are kind of natural sort of like mixtures together, but then you have this bright red, or it's more this crimson red actually that kind of like eschews it because it's not really related to either green or yellow at all. So it stands out really well if you follow color theory.
Yeah. No, it's definitely vivid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you mention his name, what immediately comes up is that
his helmet. Yeah, that T-shaped visor helmet. And actually, what's interesting too is that Boba Fett is actually using Jango Fett's armor.
Oh, how sweet!
Sort of.
Taking Father with you.
Yes, taking Father with you and wearing him the entire time.
Yeah. It's kind of oddly sentimental.
It is. Again, if you look at the two characters actually side by side actually to one another, you can actually see that their armors are exactly the same,
Except for the color.
Except for the coloring. So Jango Fett's armor is mostly in the original kind of steelish sort of color with blue accents, versus Boba Fett, who
looks rougher.
Looks rougher and is painted it more. It is painted it
Yeah.
up. But again, I think what happens when you paint something, it gets scuffed up and marked up, and so that's as a result, it gets a little bit more uglier. Boba Fett's also got this trademark dent in his helmet. It's never well explained where it came from, because again, when you consider what the armor is,
how would it dent?
How would it ever get dented? This is armor that repels lightsabers and blaster bolts. So what on earth?
So your own bulletproof jacket.
Oh yeah, very much. That was one of the reasons why Mandalorians were feared across the galaxy, was because they were nigh impervious to what you would think would be traditional sort of, oh, this will take care of it.
Because you can shoot a stormtrooper.
Oh yeah, you can shoot a stormtrooper. You can cut them to pieces with lightsabers, which is a favorite thing to do in video games, to ragdoll them and just cut them up. It's a very popular thing to do. Actually, did you know that that's why there were robots in the first movie?
Why?
So in episode 1 of Phantom Menace, they wanted to show how if you were going to have a collection of people with lightsabers, you wanted them to use it a whole lot more frequently. You didn't want them to use it against people, because you wouldn't want to have to show dismemberment in people. But you could do that for robots, because robots are not really humans, and you could...
They don't gore up.
They don't gore up, yeah. Or it's not weird at the end of the day. Because again, I mean, like, even in the games, like, you cut people up and you're kind of like, well, that's unfortunate.
They shoot. I mean, they would certainly blow up all sorts of...
they kill lots of people they kill lots of stormtroopers
in New Hope.
In A New Hope, and in Return of the Jedi, in Empire Strikes Back. They kill stormtroopers like they're putties at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They're disposable. I mean, literally, like.
Oh, I like that term, like, because I know what you're referring to with putties. Yeah.
Yes, so Power Rangers.
Power Rangers.
Yeah, and again, I mean, like, they get killed all the time, but they don't get sliced up. And if you shoot somebody, it's a lot less gory, because it's a blaster that's not really going through them at all. It's more like, it's like, oh, they got shot, so they got, like, you know.
But there's something about putting them in the white plastic suit too that makes it seem like it's not a person. No. I mean, to me, it was
it's
really
very depersonalized.
It was really something when you saw Finn take off his helmet.
Oh yeah, because that was like a big deal, and they were like, "You don't take off the helmet. No, put that thing back on."
Yeah.
What are you, some sort of monster?
Yeah. So I mean, to me, it was a big thing when Finn took off his helmet, because it humanized.
Oh yeah, no, very much humanized.
Yeah. Okay. You're going somewhere with this?
So after Jango Fett, so Jango Fett, again, depending on how you look at him, very important character in Star Wars lore. After that, though, a lot of what gets developed after this point is all based off of video games, comics, and alike from that particular point. And a lot of this is all...
And fanfic.
And fanfictions as well, yeah. So, famously, when they went way back in time, so there's a series of games called The Old Republics.
Uh-huh.
Pioneered by BioWare. It was a really kind of cool RPG in Star Wars world that took place about 6,000 years before the events of A New Hope. Because one of the things our viewers have to remember here is that when we talk about Star Wars, we talk about the timeline in Star Wars as before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin.
Okay, well, I mean, let's start here. We learn when I'm trying to think if it's Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi, but we learn that Yoda is 800 years old. So I'm assuming when we're going through The Mandalorian, we're going back.
Nope.
No.
No, so The Mandalorian actually takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
You would think you would go back in time, but we don't in this case.
But you have Baby Yoda.
You do. You have a So here's the thing that George Lucas refuses to give any sort of additional information on because he's this kind of a person.
Okay.
Yoda, the species of Yoda characters, because there's actually about a half dozen or so canonical Yoda-ish characters,
Okay.
don't have a race name at all. We don't know where they come from. The only thing that they get called...
They don't come from Tatooine?
We don't know. I mean, nothing comes from Tatooine except sand people.
Okay.
Which is, and again, which is very interesting because when they're presented...
No, what's the planet he finds Yoda on?
You mean this baby Yoda?
No, the real Yoda. When Luke finds Yoda. I should know. I just watched the movie last week. Anyway.
Dagobah.
Dagobah, you're right.
So it's, yeah, I had to think the lines over. It's like it's Dagobah. I'm literally closing my eyes and watching the movie in my head, and I was like, Dagobah.
Because you're going to the Dagobah system, and he's telling,
so the Yoda species doesn't have any canonical name at all. They're just, when they're ever referenced, they're listed as Yoda race.
Okay.
And so a lot of people were calling this the character that appears in The Mandalorian Baby Yoda, because there's not a race of these things at all, and Yoda's the best analog for it because it kind of looks like what a baby Yoda would look like.
So it's not the Yoda?
No, it's not the Yoda at all.
Okay. So I did not understand that.
No, and in fact, not necessarily a spoiler necessarily, but the baby Yoda here that we see in The Mandalorian is actually like 50 years old.
Really?
According to what they say, he's like 50 years old.
So he holds his age well.
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
I mean, Yoda was looking pretty good at 600 or at 800.
Yeah, no. I'm not going to argue that. Okay, well that's different than what I thought. I thought the Mandalorian, because I was trying to piece back together the idea that
we were following like the early rise of what would be like Yoda.
Yeah.
Which okay, so what I think is
I was trying to piece together with the idea that you have a clone son kind of that doesn't have a long life, and I was trying to reconcile the two. It wasn't working.
No. The son is an unaltered version of Jango of the clone.
Yeah.
So it ages naturally by comparison.
Okay.
So again, what's interesting that happens here at this point when we talk about
are all Yodas force sensitive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so they're a very rare race.
They're very unusual. They're a very rare race in the galaxy. Most of them are 99.8% of them are Jedi. There's occasionally one that isn't.
Okay.
And again, they're all force sensitive. It's a very much of a telltale.
Why wouldn't you
mark.
just breed bunches of them?
Okay, I'm not going to go any further to that because that's a point in the movie in the series.
Okay. All right.
You're way ahead of it. You're way ahead of it.
I'm just asking the question. Okay.
Okay.
I'll look forward to finding out.
So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about Mandalorians in the sense of the race, the culture a little bit more. But we have to remind our viewers about something that's come up since Disney has purchased Star Wars.
Okay.
Is that they basically took all the material that ever came out for Star Wars stuff, from comics to video games to books to TV
everything
shows,
that was licensed.
Everything that was licensed out initially, they've retconned that to being what they call the Legends version. So the extended universe of additional stuff. Because again, keep in mind, like eventually, like Leia and Han Solo get married and have 3 kids. Luke Skywalker.
3 kids?
3 kids.
We only know about Ren.
Again, mind you, in the extended universe.
Okay.
In the extended universe, and in one of them, again, which is the Ben Solo, does become a Sith Lord midway through there.
Okay.
And actually has to be put down by Luke Skywalker because he killed Luke Skywalker's wife, Mara Jade.
Luke got married?
Luke got married. Chewbacca dies saving one of the Han Solo kids at one point.
Aww.
Eventually, at some point here, for a book, Luke Skywalker becomes a Sith temporarily for a resurrected Darth Sidious. Although he was just playing the entire time, apparently. this race of. Do you remember the bugs from episode 2?
Yes.
They came back with a force. And I'm not even sure.
Not the Force.
No. But they came back in a real big way with the Yogg-Saron War or something of that nature, which lasted for like a good decade in the.
So are these books? Are these?
These are books. These are comics. These are referenced in video games. Like, there's an entire pantheon of an additional like world of Star Wars stuff that you would only really know about if you read the books, because there is a lot of supplementary sort of like extended universe books, and eventually you get rather than reconcile all of that stuff here at the end of the day, Disney just said, you know what,
that's all legend.
That we're gonna just call that Legends. We're gonna call that like the B plot of everything.
Then they can change whatever they want without having any requirement to be.
And really, what they want to do again there was not only to make it so that whenever, because again, keep in mind, the people who made that material own that material. So if you ever use that material, you have to pay those people for the rights for that as well. And so, but at the same time, if you are the guys creating the material, then you get to be the ones to decide who gets paid for that material. And at the end of the day, you also get to edit the story as necessary to make it fit with how you want the worlds to go.
Well, it's like recreating Spider-Man.
Yeah, so I mean, and again, keep in mind, they've redone Spider-Man dozens of times in some cases.
Well, I mean, and I think what's interesting about the whole acquisition of the Star Wars
franchise,
there we go, by Disney, and the success of The Mandalorian is that it ensures there'll be more.
Oh, yeah, no, and it would not surprise me if the Baby Yoda character appears at some point in a later Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
I honestly do think that, like, that character will appear again. I'm fairly certain that Rey will reappear in another movie down the line somewhere.
Well, I mean, if you look at the movies, because I watched Rogue One a couple of weeks ago, and again, that's like one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's a great Star Wars movie.
Yeah. In part because it doesn't end happily. It doesn't have the pretty bow off into the sunset. Well, kind of, I guess, off into the sunset.
Well,
they die.
Depending how you see the sunset.
Yeah, they die. But it doesn't have the required romance element. It doesn't have...
You don't leave it feeling happy that the story got concluded and everybody went in the right, and everything went right.
It doesn't have to be tied up with a bow.
No, and again, I mean, mind you, now everything went right in the sense that it set up. You know, it literally leaps right into A New Hope when you watch it.
It does.
So if you watch that and then you move immediately into A New Hope, it's as if you're still watching the same movie almost.
Well, and that's exactly the context in which I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of neat to see. Okay, here's how we got the plans,
mm-hmm.
and I'm sending them to my daughter.
And then literally, like, now you're on the ship hiding them on R2-D2 moments later.
Yeah.
And then again, I think that was the absolute intention of the movie. Because when we also go to the Solo movie as well, which I don't care what people say, I like the Solo movie. There's parts in which it drags, but it's still a good westerny sort of movie.
And it's one of those things I appreciate about the music and what John Williams does with the music is the music was designed very much I'm old, designed very much in the way that the 50s and 60s Saturday matinee music was.
Yes.
You would be quite normal on a Saturday to go see a double feature in a theater for 50 cents. And
big spender back then.
I know. And you could actually buy popcorn, and the popcorn would not be covered in synthetic oil.
Jaw hitting the floor right now.
Oh, I know. And you could get a drink for a dime.
I haven't had movie popcorn in the better part of like 4 or 5 years at this point.
Oh, the first time I made popcorn with my granddaughters, they'd had movie popcorn, and we made popcorn from scratch, and they were like, oh, it tastes so much better. Yeah. So, and I'm talking microwave popcorn. I'm talking about air popped popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, you used to have that kind of movie music, and they'd even be playing what we now think of as soundtracks, but before the movie, that was that sort of movie music that I mean, if you think about the music that backs Star Wars, it's not space age music. It's very much sort of.
I would not be surprised to hear that music in a regular concert for a movie that was set in, like, the 1600s or the 1800s even.
Well, it was very much.
It's got this very classic, timeless sort of feel to it that, like, in all honesty, I would love.
You could back a Western with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, and again, but again, it's so classic and timeless. Again, I love the notion that the Imperial March is a march. It's an actual type of music that is called a march.
March, yeah.
And so it invokes this kind of militaristic sort of feeling at the end of the day, with the what would again typically be like these brassy horns being these kind of like heroic sort of things, but the way they're tuned in a off key a little, or not off key. What's the best way to describe that? In a flat or a sharp sort of flats in a lot of cases, gives it this foreboding sort of sense.
Yeah, no, I mean it very much communicates what the emotion that they're trying to draw, but it isn't synthetic like you would expect
a spacey sort of thing
sci-fi,
to be.
Sci-fi, yeah.
It's one of my there was something I was watching recently, that I was watching and thinking, oh, Transformers. That's what I was watching because now, mind you, the music for Transformers is this beautiful sweeping horns and violins and this beautiful choir. It's really great, beautiful music.
Shia LaBeouf's best effort.
Oh no, his actual best movie is actually Eagle Eye.
Oh, okay.
Because Eagle Eye Eagle Eye plays perfectly for him because so the story of Eagle Eye is that he's got a twin brother who works in the military for this AI program, and he's trying to send out an emergency message because the AI has gone rogue at this point.
Yeah.
And the AI kills him. But the AI realizes that it can't be let loose onto the world and the rest of the stuff for Skynet style, unless somebody with a similar DNA and fingerprints comes in and releases him.
Right.
Releases it. So Shia LaBeouf is being tracked by satellites and all this other stuff by this AI, and he is freaking out the entire time. And it's the only time in which Shia LaBeouf freak out actually works. Because again, like, he's whining, he sounds so like scared and shitless of everything. But I would be too if a rogue AI literally sent a satellite down and tried to kill me.
Yeah.
Because literally at one point the satellite sends a satellite down and destroys the car 20 feet ahead of him with pinpoint accuracy. And the AI is like, well, you're going to do what I want you to do, otherwise I'm going to blow up, otherwise, bad things are going to happen. Yeah, like what? And then, like, seconds later, they look up, it's like, that's a comet falling. Oh my goodness, that's so weird. And then it hits this car that's like, 50 feet away or something. And he's like, and then the AI voice says, I'll do that to you. If I can hit that car with a satellite, imagine what I can do if I can hit you with a satellite. So again, it makes perfect sense.
That would be persuasive.
Now, going back to the Transformers soundtrack, though, like, if you had like this classic violins and horns for the human sort of stuff, because there's a lot of humans in the original Transformers stuff, but you had this synthetic sort of horns and noises for the Transformers, I thought that would have been a lot more poignant for that. Because when they did Tron, they had electronica duo named Daft Punk who did the music for Tron, and it's got this very kind of clubby sort of like techno-esque feel, but with a lot of violins and horns. So it's got this really kind of cool feel to it at the end of the day. It's also one of my favorite soundtracks there as well.
Well, and I've always been partial to the bar scenes in any of the Star Wars movies, and the music.
Yeah, it's so classic.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I brought up the Legends content here is that I'm not actually going to discuss anything of the Legends content. Mostly because it won't help you with watching the Mandalorian series, because Disney basically went back in time and said only the stuff that got produced by LucasArts at the time, and the LucasArts company, is what we're going to consider canon. Now, What they consider canon, though, is the 2008 to 2014 Clone Wars series, which does dive into Mandalorian topics. And so, literally dives into Mandalorian stuff.
Right.
And that's what they considered the basis for a lot of what was Mandalorian culture. And they've actually had another follow-up series. And again, Clone Wars takes place between the episode 2 and episode 3. So about 6 months into the actual Clone Wars themselves, all the Jedi are now like generals and marshal and captains or generals here, and they're leading their own little clone armies and stuff. The primary element of it here was to have a CGI TV series, which is this really kind of cool look at the end of the day. It's a fun and interesting series. If also just because Anakin Skywalker gets his own Padawan.
Oh.
And it's in this, not a Twi'lek, but it's this other race that has these kind of cool tendrils that kind of go down the side and kind of a horn sort of thing. And her name is Ashoka Tano.
Okay.
She is a very fan favorite character because she is, initially she's fan favorite for me because she holds her lightsaber backwards, which is kind of a weird sword style to begin with.
Okay.
Eventually she gets 2 lightsabers, so she's dual wielding.
Okay.
And she's a kid. So instantly everyone...
But he ultimately murders a bunch of kids.
I know. But in a kid
I'm
in the
just
sense...
saying.
In a kid in the sense that she's like 11, 12 years old.
Okay.
So like she's a Padawan. That's kind of what you would be as a Padawan.
But that totally works against...
I know what you again. It's very interesting because again, where if you know where Anakin goes from this particular point as he becomes Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So the fact that he ever had an apprentice is interesting. The show likes to dive into this notion that like he's going to be Darth Vader, so maybe he's going to do something evil and mean, and oh look, he's got that temper sort of thing, but oh no, he's still a good guy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But occasionally has like bouts of like darkness and mean and brooding in him that would eventually be Darth Vader, and occasionally they hint at the Imperial March in a very slow, somber sort of way occasionally for when like he's doing dark stuff. It's a fascinating series because it's even Star Wars, like it's so drawn out, sort of like you can barely tell it's actually there unless you actually know what it sounds like. Again, great TV series to watch if you feel like you ever have like too much time in a day and you don't mind watching half-hour shows that are aimed at children. But again,
aimed at children. Aimed at what age group?
Boys from like 8 to teens.
Okay.
But keep in mind, I mean, like remember, again, there's a collection of people that are known as bronies because they found a TV show that was My Little Pony that was aimed mostly toward girls between the ages of 3 and 7, between 3 and 9, and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Because it treated their characters as actual characters.
Yeah.
And again, keep in mind, like this was a big fan for me as well. I loved this series when it was coming out back in the day. Because again, they also bring back a lot of characters and introduce a lot of cool characters as well. So you get to learn about other Jedi and how they interact with themselves, and you get to see a lot more of what was this epic war that you really didn't ever get to see in the movies. You just got, you got the beginning of it, and you got what was the big battles at the very end of it.
Well, I mean, what I found interesting about Star Wars 3 was you have the reference by Yoda to Obi-Wan when he's first presented with Luke. Well, he's too old, and I don't understand that comment until you go back to movie 3, which shows them being trained. Shows.
Oh, you mean?
Shows future Jedi being.
Yeah, being trained and everything. Yeah,
sort of being in a Jedi boarding school.
Yeah, you see the kind of the where the students are being trained at, and
then you kind of get that further actually in movie 7, where Luke is training 8, 6.
So everything 7 Up would have Rey in it.
Oh, okay.
So
Luke eventually, you hear about him training, and he has the conflict with Ren,
Mhm.
But at that point, he's training other Jedi.
Yeah, so in between
And
6
his
and
own-
7, he's training him at his own kind of... So he's training him on Yavin 4, which is where the original Rebel base was from A New Hope.
Yeah,
And you see them training kids primarily.
yeah,
And I kind of presume that Kylo Ren at that point, or Ben Solo at that point, is
Yeah.
like maybe like in his teens.
yeah,
Maybe he's like
Yeah.
14, 15 years old.
yeah.
One of the good students, I would assume.
Well, and Han and Leia had sent him off there because he was
Force sensitive, yeah.
yeah,
So, but no, yeah, again, I mean, it's one of those, again, Yoda, keep in mind, in the original council, doesn't want to train Anakin Skywalker because he's too old. But at the same time, because he's gotten so old, he has fear and other emotions that he's gotten used to having at the end of the day, which don't mix well with the Jedi Code, and that's one of the reasons why. Yoda remarks about it again as well, is that Luke Skywalker is too old when he's there on Dagobah.
he's already angry.
He's too old at this point. You can't train somebody at this age.
Yeah.
They can't learn anymore at this point. It's not worth it because they won't get proper training at all.
Yeah.
And never mind the fact that apparently, if you train them when they're older, they're a lot more freaking powerful. Or it could
They
just
catch on quicker.
They catch on quicker, or it should just be that lineage, perhaps.
Yeah,
That Skywalker line just might be unique in that case.
yeah,
So again, Clone Wars, great TV show, great TV series, but it also developed the Mandalorian, some of the Mandalorian concepts in world building, which they stole and grifted from the expanded universe Legends books at the time as well.
okay.
Another TV show, but again, it was one of the few Star Wars things that got considered canon by Disney. So much so is that when they came out with their follow-up series, which was called Rebels, which takes place about 2-3 years, a couple of years after the events of Episode 3 here. So Darth Vader's been around for like maybe 4 or 5 years. It's a couple years before the events of Yavin, of the Battle of Yavin 4.
Mm-hmm.
So Rebels, actually one of the main characters that is a character named Sabine Wren, who herself is a Mandalorian, and she's actually got her own kind of really kind of cool funky armor, actually, very colorful.
Oh, that's really pretty.
Yeah, and
A little purple in there.
Let me find there's another picture over here without her helmet on, if I could find. There it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so she's one of the lead characters in the in Rebels at the end of the day, along with a former Jedi that happens to be there as well.
Because you need to have a former Jedi.
Because I mean, like, if you're gonna have a Star Wars series, I think you kind of have to have a Jedi somewhere along the way.
You actually really do, because it's what keeps it in the family, as so to speak.
It keeps it grounded in that Star Wars universe. You don't. Admittedly,
Otherwise, it could take place independently.
It really kind of could feel like it takes place independently, but like, I mean, even in Rogue One, like you keep one of the characters is apparently a Force gifted blind person at this point. Used to be
I love him.
But now keep in mind that entire planet that they were at was where all the Jedi lightsaber crystals were supposedly being mined from.
I am the Force. The Force is.
I am one with the Force. The Force is one with me. I am one with the Force. The Force is one.
And
with
he's
me.
literally walking
straight forward.
with people are shooting all around him,
mm-hmm.
and he's walking dead in the center.
Hey, if you're blind, you can't see it coming.
You can't.
Can't flinch.
And he just keeps, and that's actually one of my favorite death scenes.
It is.
Not to blow
It's unfortunate, but it is poignant.
It is poignant because
his good friend dies, and he takes up his mantra, and
even though he's a non-believer.
Yeah, he doesn't believe at all, but it makes sense. And actually, if you go back in time, it would not surprise me if that particular character. No, he actually was in the war. So
okay.
Because I was thinking about it here ahead of time, and I was like, was he a Mandalorian? No. He was actually he's actually wearing like Storm clone trooper armor and just using their stuff at the end of the day. He doesn't. He's not actually
kind of a scavenger, kind of a.
Oh yeah, very much a scavenger.
Yeah.
So both Clone Wars and Rebels actually does a good job of continuing some of the Mandalorian storyline. So when we get to the actual Mandalorian lore, which I know has probably taken us a good 40 minutes to an hour to get to, anyways.
Yeah.
So the Mandalorians are a clan-based system of warriors that come from the planet of Mandalore, which is a place in the Outer Rim. Now, to talk about the Outer Rim is kind of like to talk about the Wild West.
Yeah.
It's in the boonies. It's far away from any sort of civilization. Inner Rims are like nice planets. They're like they're developed. They're like cities. It's like going from like New York to like the middle of nowhere in Kansas.
Okay.
Who knows what you're going to find in the middle of Kansas?
Yeah.
Nothing. Not to knock on Kansas, but as an example,
could be Wyoming.
Could be Wyoming. Could be Idaho. Could be Dakota. One of the Dakotas. Let's just say like it's not like you're not in California anymore.
Yeah.
So, majority of the people who are Mandalorians were these kind of these crusaders, I guess is the best way to early describe them, because what they did is they took over neighboring planets, and basically kind of created their own Mandalore system eventually. And eventually, as their fame as mercenaries, bounty hunters, and warriors kind of grew, they eventually got to the Inner Rims, which was where all the Jedi were at. And seeing the Jedi there, the Jedi mowed them down because the Jedi were like, "Oh, how cute! Sword, lightsaber." And this actually led to the Mandalorians developing their famous armor and their famous Mandalorian armor, and including their weapons. And eventually, what the armor did for them was that because it would not only deflect blaster bolts, but also deflect lightsabers as well, because again, like Beskar can't cut through lightsabers, or lightsabers can't cut through Beskar at the end of the day. It gave the Mandalorians an equal footing to fight with them at the end of the day, and to the point where Mandalorians took out Jedis fairly frequently. Because again, like if you're a Jedi,
the Jedis are always the good guys.
They are, but again, you have to remember that the like if you're
now, are Mandalorians mercenaries then?
They're warriors in the sense that they act as mercenaries. They've acted as bounty hunters. Basically, if you were to see like a Mandalorian, it was safe to presume that they were for hire, and that if you paid them properly, they would get you what you needed at the end of the day.
Okay.
And then in the sense of like Jedi here, like most Jedi, we're not going to expect to see a Mandalorian. There weren't a lot of them out there in the galaxy. Kind of like Hitmen, I guess, would be a good example for them as well.
All right.
But again, because they're not out there all the time, like you wouldn't see them immediately. So if you didn't know they existed, something where normally your lightsaber would cut through them, and they just kind of like, and it's kind of like hits their armor and kind of like bounces off. You're just kind of like, well, I wasn't expecting that, sort of situation. So there is that.
Okay.
We get further into Mandalorian lore here again. The Mandalorians and the Jedis are like pretty up there with like Sith, and kind of like mirror opposites of one another. As where like where Jedi would have lightsabers and kind of a martial sort of thing here. You expect Mandalorians would have like the guns and the pistols and the rifles who are taking you out. But it's not all but it wasn't always the case here where Mandalorians and Jedi were enemies all the time. There's actually very famously a Mandalorian who was taken as a child to become a Jedi. His name is Tar Vizsla. And he was the first Mandalorian to become a Jedi. They ended up not getting any more of them out there because Mandalore wouldn't give up their children to become Jedi at all. But Tar Vizsla actually created a very unique lightsaber that is very important to Mandalore lore at the end of the day, called the Dark Saber. By comparison to normal lightsabers, it's kind of this rounded sort of hilt that has the blade that kind of like shoots up, that's like a tube almost of pure energy. The Dark Saber is a very angular cut sort of thing, kind of looks like a katana almost. Mm-hmm. And its blade is actually like a katana as well, but it's very thin, and it has a sharp point at the end where it kind of curves up. But what's interesting about the darksaber is that it's a pure black lightsaber.
Okay, because lightsaber colors have meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume pure black is evil.
And not necessarily evil. So the various lightsabers have had different canonical meanings for Jedi. So blue's lightsaber meant you were a guardian style Jedi, which meant you were kind of you were the guys that went out there and kept the peace for the most part. Like you would get sent out to go do missions and stuff. Greens were what they called a sentinel Jedi. These were Jedis who were more gifted in the Force, and the lightsaber is more of like, I need this for protection sort of elements. These were the kind of Jedi who were, were the Yodas at the end of the day. These are the guys that picked up buildings and did all these amazing stuff with the Force. They could still be equally prowess with the lightsabers, but they were more attuned with using the Force at the end of the day. Then you have an orange-colored lightsaber, which was I forget what the technical term is. Maybe the green one. Maybe the green one's not even the correct name for that either. Because now I think I might have gotten them confused. Oh no, a green one was a consular Jedi.
Okay.
The orange one is the Sentinel.
Okay.
Blanked on that here. Sentinels were kind of like Jedi that lived away from the temple. They might come back to visit every couple of years, but they lived out on the far edge of society, and they just kind of were there to help not just maintain the peace, but also to kind of keep an eye out on the world. They were typically
watchmen.
They were watchmen. They were kind of like forest rangers at the end of the day. It's kind of a better way, maybe might be a better term to see it. If they found they were also in charge of trying to find force-sensitive children to become Jedi at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of mostly worked on their own. They autonomously. They didn't have a lot of people out there. Those were typically orange lightsabers. You had a collection of what they called yellow lightsabers, which were temple guards. In fact, as a temple guard, your lightsaber was passed down from somebody else, because it was this weird kind of double-hilted lightsaber that wasn't common.
Okay.
Then you have purple, which was unique in the sense that nobody had ever seen a purple lightsaber before Mace Windu. And do you know the reason why there's a purple why Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber?
No, why?
Because during episode 1, Samuel L. Jackson, who plays Mace Windu, lamented to George Lucas that he never got to swing around his lightsaber and never got to turn it on. And he pointedly asked George Lucas, hey, what colors do Jedi get to have? It's it's blue and green. And he said, maybe Mace Windu's got a purple one. It's maybe. Because Samuel L. Jackson has to have something that's purple in every one of his movies. He loves that color, and he likes to see that color somewhere on his character.
That's pretty cool.
So that's so again, he basically got George Lucas to give him a purple lightsaber at the end of the day.
And what does purple mean?
Purple just means badass.
Oh, okay.
So it's whatever Samuel L. Jackson has on his wallet, which I think if you go back to Pulp Fiction,
yeah,
it's the one that says "badass motherfucker."
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, what does the purple lightsaber mean? Samuel L. Jackson.
There you go.
Now, obviously, red means is an artificial crystal, but that's primarily used for the Sith because they wanted to. Because at the end of the day, here, their kyber crystals are artificially created. Because if you had a blue or green one, they're
not organic.
They're not organic. Yeah. So you use the artificial stuff.
Yeah.
But that's how you get this crimson red sort of dark lightsaber.
Or if you're Ren, you get sort of that sparky thing.
Well, Ren's is sparky because it's broken.
Okay.
It's the crystal is too energetic for this particular lightsaber hilt, which was even of itself was not properly created at the end of the day. So as a result, it flickers and has this chaotic sort of nature to it because it's not actually finished lightsaber at the end of the day.
So I'm going to throw this out there.
Okay.
And you can spit up all over it. I always found sort of and especially once you get this sort of Ren finds Luke's lightsaber, right?
Okay.
Well, you remember that though, right?
I do. He doesn't find it necessarily though.
Rey. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Rey finds
Luke's lightsaber. which was Anakin's originally.
Was it?
So again, the lightsaber that Rey finds is Luke Skywalker's first lightsaber, because that's the one that Obi-Wan Kenobi gifted to him when he said it was his father's, which is what Obi-Wan took away at the very end of Episode 3 when Anakin is getting burned. So technically it's Anakin's, but we all call it Luke Skywalker's first lightsaber.
Okay. So it struck me ages before, but then that solidified it for me. It's a lot like wands choosing their wizard rather than wizards choosing their wands.
Yes.
It's very Harry Potter-like.
Harry Potter does feel like that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Harry Potter comes later, but chronologically.
And that's actually how the Kyber crystals kind of work for Jedi. Like you reach out to the Force in one of these Kyber crystal caves, and the idea there being is that when you reach out with the Force will kind of call a crystal to you, and then that's the crystal that you use for your lightsaber at the end of the day. So whether it's blue or green kind of is less of what your occupation is and more of what the Force kind of called out to you at the end of the day.
So sort of like the sorting hat.
Kind of like the sorting hat, yeah. And again, and the notion there as well is that, like, I think with Mace Windu's purple lightsaber, like, he reached out to the Force and this is what the Force said at the end of the day, and so that's kind of an interesting notion there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Mace Windu in extended lore is kind of also straddling this line between good and evil as well. Like he's one of these weird masters that like preaches the light side of the Force, but also kind of delves a little bit into the dark side of the Force as necessary to do good.
So justified evil.
Justified evil, yeah, I guess maybe the best way to put that. But no, the Darksaber, again, is weird in the sense that it's all black, but it has kind of like this galaxy sort of sheen to it at the end of the day. So like you see like stars in it, kind of like if you were looking at deep space almost.
Wow.
I don't have a good picture of it here necessarily, although it is the saber that that Sabine is holding up.
And you do see sort of some
little specks of white in there, yeah. But it's interesting that it's got this kind of like very angular sort of look to it as well, as where most lightsabers have this kind of roundish sort of like, tubular sort of, thing.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of it as like a katana at the end of the day almost.
Yeah.
So Tar Vizsla again, very important character. He, in Mandalorian lore, he eventually leaves the Jedi, and upon returning to Mandalore is promoted to the leader of Mandalore. Okay. And he's given the title of Mandalore. Mandalore.
Mandalore, okay.
So not like so it's MAND, comma, or hyphen, or apostrophe, ALOR. So Mandalore. As we're the
man of the lore.
Mandalore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and so the saber itself is a very important element on there. It's kept by his family, the House of Vizsla, which eventually gets owned by Pre-Vizsla, who is another Mandalore in the world here at the end of the day. Eventually, at a certain point here, there is just prior to about 100 years prior to the events of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the Jedi and the Mandalore kind of end their fighting because they have this big fight on Mandalore that causes a cataclysm on the planet that ends up turning most of their planet from these beautiful, what was once these beautiful, luscious forests and greenery and lakes and lakes and mountains, very kind of nice looking world, into a world of pure desert oceans of white sand. And devastates the planet to the point where the people and the populace have to create domed cities in order to be able to survive on the planet here. So it's that inhospitable at this point here. And just about a year before the events of Episode 1, there has this civil war of the Mandalorians. Now there's the Mandalorians at this point here, as much as they still kind of practice their Mandalorian ways, they've gotten to the point where, like, we're not going to keep fighting anymore. We got to rebuild our own world, and we've been devastated by the wars for the last centuries by this point. So there's two kind of races of Mandalorians at this point. There's the New Guard, which was aiming for this kind of peace and unity and pacifism. Like, we're not going to fight anymore. We need to actually make a society again. And you have the old Mandalorians, which are the people who want to go back to the old ways of conquering and fighting and things like that. Well, the two sides have a fight, and the new Mandalorians win. So the old Mandalorians get banished to a moon, essentially, at that point here. So then by the time we get to Clone Wars, the old Mandalorians actually joined the Republic, oddly enough. It's something that they were starchily against beforehand. They've actually now joined the Republic. And by the Clone Wars, they've actually created a coalition with about another 1,500 planets that have basically preached pacifism in the war between the Separatists and the Republic at the end of the day. So the planets that want to separate from the Republic, they've actually said, we're not going to participate in the fighting. We want nothing to do with it. Whoever wins, wins. We don't want anything to do with this at all.
Or with the winners are. What the winners are,
yeah. Just
leave us out.
We don't want anything to do with it. We just want to be safe. We just want to be peaceful. We don't want anything at all. The old Mandalorians are still kind of kicking around, and they don't like the idea of... They want Mandalorians to go back to the way they were. And so these old Mandalorians have actually rebranded themselves as Death Watch.
Oh.
I know, a nice edgy name.
Yeah.
So they renamed themselves Death Watch because they're kind of watching over the Mandalore that's dying. That's why they call them that. And they've actually decided at this point to work with Count Dooku and the Separatists to get power back for the Mandalorians. Because, again, the Separatists and Count Dooku would really love to just have Mandalorian warriors fighting for them because of their prowess and their...
Protect them, yeah.
Well, not only that, again, they're feared by the Jedi because they kill Jedi.
Yeah.
They're one of the few things in the universe outside of Sith that can kill Jedi. And so what ends up happening here is that Dooku ends up, and the Separatists end up attacking Mandalore. And the Mandalorians do their best to protect themselves, but they're not winning at the end of the day, which causes huge public outcry because it's like, how can you guys protect us? And actually what's interesting is that there's a certain point in the Senate where they're like, let's go send a force to Mandalore to go help them, to protect them from, to go protect Mandalore at the end of the day. And the Mandalorian leader here, which is, and I gotta have to find her name real quickly.
Her.
It's a her. Her name is, where is it? Right here somewhere. Her name is Satine.
Mm-hmm.
Satine Kryze. It's interesting because she is the world is led by Duchess Satine Kryze, Kryze, Kryze. And actually, she has a kind of like hidden romancer thing with Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is actually kind of interesting. Like the two of them have like this romantic sort of relationship that's not explicit. Like
they don't have any children.
They don't have any children, but Obi-Wan likes being around her, and he's not sure why, but he really just enjoys her company. And Sabine and Satine likes being around him, and he's she's like, Ken, if you ever want to get rid of those Jedi ways, you could always come to Mandalore.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan's kind of like, no, it's okay. No, yeah. I got this thing I have to do. I've got a code. Like, I'm not supposed to have a relationship at all.
Yeah.
Being the good guy at the end of the day. So actually, again,
and that's a question. Are
no.
Okay.
Jedi are not allowed to get married and have children.
Okay.
And the reason for that being is that the fear is that they would create children that were hyper force sensitive at a certain point.
If you had two Jedis married, but what if you just did a Leia Han thing?
Well, again, I mean, like the reason why they were, so Anakin and Padme were keeping their marriage secret because you're not supposed to marry as a Jedi because you're not supposed to have strong emotions at all. It's supposed to be wonky with having strong emotions eventually leads to the dark side of the Force.
Right.
But also so much in the fact that
because emotions can't be controlled.
Emotions can't be controlled, and that they come on in wild ways that are not predictable. But the major concern for the Jedi as well is that if you have a person that you're married to, you're far less likely to take certain risks that might put you in danger or them in danger instead.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why in Batman lore, Batman doesn't get married at all. So to diverge here a little bit. So there's a character in Batman lore that Batman has a very deep relationship with. I can't remember her. Talia. Her name is Talia. They have a very deep relationship to the point where Talia and Batman have done the horizontal mambo, is the best way to describe that.
Okay.
And Talia has become pregnant. And as a result, Batman, now knowing that he's going to be a father, he's taking less risks, and he's hesitating because he wants to be there for his kid, because he doesn't want, because he didn't grow up with a father. He didn't have a chance to grow up with a father. He wants his son to have a child. But as a result of not taking as many risks and hesitating, Batman actually gets himself more hurt as a result.
Right.
And Talia, seeing that this is happening to Bruce Wayne, that he has to be Batman for his own penance at the end of the day, but at the same time, she knows that this is what he has to do. He would hate himself if he wasn't Batman at the end of the day. Decides to have a miscarriage to allow Batman to continue to be Batman. And in later stories, they retcon that to say that Talia said she had a miscarriage, but that really she had the child, and that child is Damian Wayne, and who becomes a Robin down the line eventually.
Okay.
So, but to bring that back to Jedi, at the end of the day, you want yourself to be true to the Jedi code at the end of the day, so you're not married at all to anybody, so that way you can't be distracted at all either. So, and at the same time, if you're a Jedi and your enemies knew that you had a wife or something like that, because it's not as if you have a secret identity at all.
It gives you somebody that they could
could target and leverage at the end of the day. Yeah. So, but no, again, like it'll come up here in just a minute here.
Okay.
So again, Count Dooku and the Separatist forces are attacking Mandalore, and the people basically are rising up against Satine here, saying, like, you need to protect us. Why aren't you protecting us? And then from the moon comes Death Watch, where they come in and they basically overthrow the government, saying, we'll protect you guys. And they do. They drive the Separatists kind of off the world there. And actually what they end up doing here is that they pledge Mandalore to the Separatists here.
Okay.
And so the Republic clearly doesn't like that. And because, again, like, it's supposed to be a peaceful planet. Hidden within Death Watch, though, is a character that you may have heard of before. His name is Darth Maul.
Oh, yeah.
So, Darth Maul is kind of working with Death Watch. And eventually... So one of the things you have to know about the Darksaber here, which is kind of an interesting lore point here, is that the owner of the Darksaber is only the owner because they defeated the last person in combat for it. So
like Dumbledore's wand.
Yes. Well, no, not necessarily like Dumbledore's wand. Dumbledore's wand was the notion that it will win any fight for you.
But who does it respond to?
It responds to
the person who last
its current owner.
Well, but its current owner is determined by
whoever de-wanded, in that particular sense. Whoever defeated the last owner becomes the new owner of the Elder Wand at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The sword, though, it's not that same sense where, like, the sword is like, no, I won't work for you. It's like, but whoever owns the sword has to defeat that person in combat, because the sword is kind of the hallmark bearer of, oh, I'm the ruler of Mandalore.
Okay.
So you can only win. So you have to win the sword by combat. You can't just, like, say, "Here, you're the new leader."
Yeah.
You can't. That's not allowed.
Okay.
So Darth Maul, actually beats Pre Vizsla for the saber and kills him and takes over all of Mandalore and all the Mandalorians.
Ooh.
Who proceeds to just decide, you know what? Well, it's Darth Maul who actually decides he's not going to join the Separatists, excuse me, but what he's going to do, he really wants vengeance against Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he really wants vengeance against the Jedi, and so he actually ends up killing Satine in front of Obi-Wan Kenobi with the Darksaber. Unfortunately, and Obi-Wan really does freak out about this. He actually cries, and he's like, if he was going to turn to the dark side, that would have been the point he would have done it.
Yeah. It's
a very kind of pivotal scene in the series for him. And so now I have to get my notes here, because this is where it gets kind of a little crazy, because over the course of a couple episodes, Darth Maul kills Satine and takes over full control over the Mandalore culture. There's a separatist group led by Satine's sister called Bo-Katan, who leads a group called the Night Owls, which is an all-female Mandalorian troop.
Okay,
it's kind of cool. It eventually gets some more male characters in there eventually. Yeah. So Maul's trying to fight that off. He eventually gets visited by Darth Sidious, who basically captures him and basically like, no, not you, bad apprentice. How dare you still be alive and not come back to me? Darth Maul eventually leaves, but on his way back to Mandalore, he loses a lot of his power base, because now Death Watch is fighting against this separatist sort of civil war thing amongst the other Mandalorians there. And eventually what ends up happening is that the Republic's just like, you know what? We need to get back Mandalore. Let's go send an entire legion over there to go reclaim Mandalore. And so all the Night Owls kind of disappear, kind of leave, because they're being hunted down as well, because they think they're a part of Death Watch, because at one point they were.
Okay. So
they're being hunted. They hunt down all these these Mandalorians. Darth Maul gets captured and then eventually disappears along the way. It's actually Ahsoka Tano who defeats Darth Maul, oddly enough. But at this point here, she's probably like 16, 17 years old. She's a lot wiser and smarter at this point. She actually at one point leaves the Jedi Order because she doesn't believe the Jedi Order is going in the right path of the Force at all. So she's a smart one. Mm-hmm. Which is how she survives the Great Purge that ends up happening.
Oh, when
they get Order 66.
Yeah.
She's actually on what they call a Venator, which was the earlier version of the Star Destroyers, when the Order came out. And she just barely survived by using the Force to take out the implant in her commander's brain, that would otherwise make it so that the Commander Rex would kill her.
Yeah.
And as a result, the entire crew ends up becoming a part of what they call the 501 Legion, which is Darth Vader's personal sort of guard at the end of the day. So that's where that comes from. The 501st is a very popular cosplay troop for Star Wars. As it's called when you cosplay as in Star Wars, it's called trooping.
Okay.
It's a big deal because like you have to get your costume approved to troop with them officially.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's if you want to be a stormtrooper, you have to have there's an 80-point test for your costume that has to match up, and you have to be above 90% to be able to troop with a 501st Legion. Because the 501st Legion doesn't just have.
So I assume that there are people on Etsy that will make you an approved costume.
There's people on it.
How expensive is that?
Stormtrooper armor can range anywhere from poor quality, about $300, to nice quality, about $800, to really nice quality in the $1,500 range.
Wow.
Yeah, the Stormtrooper armor is a big deal.
Well, I mean, I know somebody who's really. Mark has a friend who's really into it, mm-hmm. and has a.
Oh yeah, no, he's got a couple different things out there. I've seen his, because I believe he does actually troop with the 501st as well. And
his daughter has a purple Stormtrooper costume mm-hmm. that he had made for her when she was like 5, and I thought, what a waste! It had to cost quite a bit, and she'll only be able to wear it for a couple of years.
I think the daughter will, because they have a second daughter as well, and I'm sure the daughter will wear it. But mind you, his daughter's also done Rey as well. He's walked around as a walker as well. He's actually made this entire thing where he was a walker.
Yeah.
He's done actually a bunch of cool cosplay. He's in, I believe his name is Matt. He works in realty. He's
Real
a
estate,
realtor.
yeah. He's a realtor.
So he does a lot of cool stuff at the end of the day. Mark found a really good friend.
Yeah.
And I've actually gone to him for ideas on how to build stuff as well. So
oh, okay. Yeah, because I know he does stuff himself.
Mm-hmm. So he's been a very good, useful resource here. So what ends up happening here with Mandalore is that when the Republic retakes Mandalore here eventually for the Republic, the next day they turn on Order 66 and become the Empire now. So Mandalore, by this point here, the Mandalorians, the only kind of remaining ones, the Night Owls, the other people that were like mercenaries and bounty hunters anyways, they were like not there on Mandalore when it was happening, so they kind of avoided a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And any sort of remaining Mandalorians that were on the planet kind of just sided with the Empire at this point. Now, Bo-Katan was named the regent for Mandalore after the Purge, or after the after the Empire took the planet back, but she didn't want anything to do with what the Empire was doing, so another person took ownership of it. And the planet for the next couple decades was being used as a place where you trained stormtroopers and officer cadets.
Wow. Okay.
Because again, Mandalorians were like the best warriors in the universe
Yeah.
at this point. They're like the samurai essentially. Darth Maul kind of disappears into the ether. He does other stuff that gets talked about in Rebels eventually. Mm-hmm. And then so by the time we do get to the Rebels, they are working with Bo-Katan to try to retake Mandalore at the end of the day. So there's a splinter group of all these Night Owls that are trying to retake Mandalore for Mandalorians, really. They eventually do take back over the planet, but then the Empire decided to come in and is like, you know what? Maybe we really don't need Mandalore anymore, and they just wipe everybody out with overwhelming force.
Yeah.
Like the Empire can do. All the armor that was made on Mandalore gets kind of melted down into ingots, essentially. And the ingots here, these Beskar ingots are kind of got this Damascus sort of quality to them, kind of these wavy sort of lines, and you can see the Imperial print on them, kind of like gold bars almost. So they're out there. And by that point here again, and it's kind of the most of the end for Mandalore as far as the mainline stories go. But obviously when you watch The Mandalorian, you'll get to learn more about that. So I also wanted to just quickly talk about Mandalorian armor. Mm-hmm. Again, it's all Mandalorians have that kind of same T-shaped sort of visor thing going on with their helmets. You can obviously decorate your helmet in any particular way, as we've seen with some characters. Uh-huh. But that helmet design and look is very common and very, very ubiquitous throughout the entire Mandalorians here.
Okay.
Most Mandalorians wear Beskar armor. Again, it's metal that deflects blaster bolts, can stand really, really strong forces. You know what I mean? Like if you had like an entire ship made out of Beskar, it would cost like having a car made out of platinum. Ooh. But it would also be like nobody was touching this car at all, and nobody was ever going. Like if you got into an accident, you hoped the people in the next car survived because you were going to be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But Mandalorian armor also has a trademark jetpacks on it with sometimes rockets on the back, so you can fly around in them. You can also have some mounted with flamethrowers or darts that get shot out of the wrists. Famous darts include like sleeping darts, poison darts, and darts that's just kind of like homing attack on you. You also have most Mandalorians are also wearing primarily guns, mostly, so blasters, I guess is the best way to put it. So a lot of them are either rifles or sidearm sort of pistols or heavy repeater sort of like cannons, for the most part. Okay, so the other one I wanted to talk about really quickly was the Darksaber. We kind of went over its principles here. Darth Maul, when we last spoke about it, had the lightsaber, and Darth Maul ended up leaving it on a planet called Dathomir, which is kind of where the Zabaraki species kind of comes from. It's the horned kind of people.
Okay.
He left it there while he was escaping Darth Sidious at one point, and just didn't come back for it at the end of the day. It was eventually found by Sabine, who was the girl from Rebels. So
right.
She eventually found it at the end. She eventually found the saber there, and oddly enough, where the rule doesn't quite make sense, she gifted it to Ko-Batan at the end of the day, and Ko-Batan didn't have this like freak out of like, no, I didn't win it from you. Because in theory, like, Sabine having the sword here means
she's the ruler.
She's the ruler of Mandalore.
Right.
And then she gives it to Bo-Katan, and Bo-Katan's not freaking out over the fact, it's like, no, I didn't win this. I have to have won this.
Yeah.
That notion didn't come in until like much later on, eventually, at the end of the day. And so there's some dubiousness about that ruling at the end of the day. But again, like, she didn't freak out initially when she received it, so it's kind of like, well, I didn't win this.
Yeah.
And then the Purge happened, where again the Empire came in and basically just wiped out all the Mandalorians that were there on Mandalore. And we don't know where the Darksaber is to this day. So it could come up.
It could come up.
And again, so what questions do you have going into the Mandalorian?
Oh, I'm just looking forward to. I'm looking forward to it because I know a lot of people who have enjoyed it. And certainly Baby Yoda's become a thing.
Oh, it's definitely a thing. It was a thing again when it was first coming out, and I remember.
Now, is he called Yoda?
No.
Okay.
Throughout the entire series, he's known as the kid or the child.
Okay.
He's actually credited as that throughout most of the series.
Okay.
Even the Mandalorian is not known as. He has his own name, but he's not referenced as that at all.
Okay.
He's actually referenced often as Mandalorian or Mando.
Okay.
Mando, how are you doing? Welcome back.
Sounds a lot like Lando, but you know.
A little, yeah. There's a character that seems very Lando-ish when he's there too.
Yeah.
So, again, one of the things you have to remember is that by the time of 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, the Empire does and doesn't exist anymore. They're they're called the remnants of the Empire. The New Republic is trying to slowly weed them all out and get rid of them. But most of the people that are in the Empire now, it's through a handful of remaining stormtroopers that exist out there that are still stormtroopers. Lots of like generals, lieutenants, and captains. There's a lot of Imperial hardware that still exists out there in the sense of Star Destroyers, bases, armaments, and tools of that nature. But they're not making more of it, is the best way to describe that. Or if they are, it's in small quantities. And most of these individual people that are part of the remnants of the Empire are all either, if they're leaders, they're leading their own groups of stuff, but they all think they're the boss at the end of the day.
So everything's fallen apart after Luke dies?
Or after Darth Vader and Darth Sidious die, yes.
Oh, okay.
Luke would still be around by this point.
Okay. So we are in between which two movies?
We are in between Episode 6 and Episode 7. So we're
okay. So Yoda's dead.
Yoda's dead. Darth Vader is dead. It's Luke Skywalker's last known Jedi in the universe. Okay. Before we ever get to hear of Rey and Finn and their entire storylines.
Okay.
So but again, we're 5 years after it. So like,
and Finn is just an undeveloped.
So
we think he's Force positive.
We think he's Force sensitive, but it wouldn't surprise us if he's probably not. I mean, the fact that Rey's Force sensitive is probably the better choice at the end of the day, because it's kind of neat to have a female protagonist.
But I always thought it was nice to have some diversity, because aside from
Mace Windu,
you don't have
potentially. Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know what'll happen in later movies. We like to think that he's Force sensitive, but by all known accounts, he hasn't shown himself to be Force sensitive.
But he was raised as a stormtrooper. Come on. I
know it'd be nice if that were the case, but
yeah.
But I'm okay if it's not.
Okay.
That's the best way I can describe that.
Okay.
So, So that's our timeline for The Mandalorian. Again, your homework here is to watch the first 8 episodes.
Okay.
Now, each episode ranges anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes.
Oh, I'm dandy with that.
And so, again, I imagine you can probably watch 2 episodes for an hour's bike.
Yep.
So there's a good chance for that. And again, it's primarily only available on Disney Plus. And again, if you just get the regular Disney Plus, it's $6.99 a month, which is really not that bad, actually.
It's not.
And it's going to have, and again, like, due to the COVID sort of stuff, a lot of the new stuff has only ever come out in there. So, like, the new Pixar movie, which was supposed to come out in theaters, which was called Soul, came out on Disney Plus. I'm told it's actually really good. I just haven't watched it yet because I don't have Disney Plus. But if you ever want to watch any sort of Marvel-related stuff or any sort of... The Simpsons are now all on Disney Plus because they bought out Fox.
You know how I feel about that.
I know.
That's okay.
All the Star Wars stuff is on
Not
Disney
a
Plus. There's a lot of, again, so like... And the Disney Plus has been coming out with a lot of new original stuff here as well. So the final season of Clone Wars, which they did, so they did finally a 7th season, which is where you have that famous fight on Mandalore with Darth Maul and Ahsoka Tano. That's only on Disney Plus. The Mandalorian is on there. They have a couple other shows in there. They have a show called The World According to Jeff Goldblum, which is kind of a National Geographic sort of thing.
With Jeff Goldblum.
With Jeff Goldblum.
Interesting guy.
Oh, man. Yeah. I liked him in his apartments.com commercials.
Oh, he's the fly.
Oh, absolutely.
And Earth Girls Are Easy.
Yeah, but you got to remember that not a lot of people remember Earth Girls Are Easy.
Great movie.
Much the same way that, like, I will forever remember Stanley Tucci as an Undercover Blues.
Muerte.
Muerte. He means death.
Morty.
Yeah.
Hey, Morty.
Morty. Yeah, I remember watching...
Unsung movie.
It's a beautiful classic movie. It's
Undercover Blues.
Undercover Blues.
Randy Quaid.
And who was the other
Kathleen
person?
Turner.
Kathleen Turner. And then again, Stanley Tucci.
Yeah.
A very young Stanley Tucci, too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Early Tucci.
Oh, yeah, but great movie. Absolutely great movie. Alrighty, so we're going to put all the notes here on and links to get to Disney Plus here as well on our website at thenerdtutorialpodcast.com, where you can listen to our episodes and see all the show notes that I generate for the show. We also continue this conversation as well at our Facebook group at facebook.com/nerdtutorialpodcast. And then if you want to follow any of the things that we're following here as well, so again, like we follow Star Wars news and Star Trek news, and then Harry Potter, and now Gundam, and Animal Crossing. We follow all these cool topics that we've covered here throughout our different podcasts on our Twitter page, on our Twitter account. So that's Twitter_tutorial, or nerd_tutorial on Twitter. And you can message me there with ideas for for new topics, or any sort of comments, critiques, and other stuff like that. We'll be happy to hear from you guys as well when you do that. And wherever you're listening to this on a podcast, please make sure that you rate us. It actually helps bring us up on the list so we can get more people to listen to us as well. So please make sure that you rate us wherever you're listening to this podcast here today. But on behalf of myself and my mom, we hope that you stay safe out there in these weird times. And we'll see you guys again next time.
Bye.